So good afternoon, everyone. Once again, Lama Kathy here on behalf of the Columbus KTC, for joining the Deepening Your Dharma Practice program we're doing today, retreat we're doing today. This morning, we talked about mindfulness and how it can help us to deepen our Dharma practice. And just to briefly review what we talked about this morning, we talked about mindfulness and alertness, the two skills we get from practicing quiet sitting meditation, and how those can help us, give us the power to change old patterns and to build new ones. Because I think for most folks, until they started practicing meditation, they weren't aware, perhaps, as much as they could be for how their moment-to-moment thinking can influence their moment-to-moment experience of the world. And once they find that thinking has such a powerful influence on what we experience in the world, they begin to want to get hold of that process through the practice of mindfulness. And so the number one side effect that people tell me when they have first started practicing meditation is they say, oh my gosh, I didn't know that I did that bad habit, or, oh, I didn't know that I did that bad habit. Oh my gosh, I thought I had given up that bad habit, but here it still is. And so this awareness that we get of our moment-to-moment mental states is both good news and bad news. It's kind of bad news in that it makes us feel a little discouraged, because we often think we're doing much better with our habits than we actually are. And but so that's the bad news. But the good news is that mindfulness, that capacity to notice, label, and let go of distraction, and then return our attention to the breath for a fresh start, that capacity to change our point of focus, or change our object of meditation, our ability to let go, notice, let go, and return is a powerful thing, because that is what gives us power over the process of building new habits and letting go of old ones. In a way, mindfulness disrupts our tendency to tell ourselves stories about what we are and what we're doing. And mindfulness it's a good disruption. Because for some of us, the stories that we tell ourselves about our lives are not positive stories. They're negative stories, and we sort of sometimes go down the drain with those stories. And the practice of mindfulness allows us to stop going down the drain, and also to begin to go up by making aspirations, and positive aspirations for our life and for the future. And so this, of course, allows us to make new habits. And of course, our next task is to choose what new habits we choose to replace the old bad habits with. What good habits will we enact to replace the old ones? And so what we started this morning was we started by talking about the bridge, building the bridge from our cushion to our everyday life. And because we have this imaginary line between practice on the cushion on this side and daily life on this side. And so this, the purpose of this particular retreat that we're doing today is to find ways to build that bridge and erase that imaginary line between practice seat and daily life. And so just to make sure that we recover, that I cover once more the things we talked about today. In the morning session, we talked about some of the things we can do to build that bridge is start with mind taming and work toward mind training. The practice of Lojong, or mind training, is a Tibetan discipline that allows us to get hold of our thoughts and plug them into a formula that allows us to take negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and by using the formula of the mind training slogans, to turn our negative mental afflictions into moments of wakefulness. to turn our negative habits into moments of wakefulness, where we can say, may my negative habit contain the negative habit of all beings. And by my going through this moment of working with my negative habits, may I and all sentient beings be free of these negative habits. And may we become Buddhas, which are the ultimate freedom from this. And by doing this little formula, with using this little formula with our mental afflictions, we can begin to make changes to erase that imaginary line between practice and everyday life. And so that's a little bit about what we talked about this morning. We also talked about using mindfulness to be aware of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and to mentally make offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And by doing that, to deepen our commitment and refuge. So I think that's where we left off this morning. And this afternoon, I'm going to begin by doing just a short session of meditation with you. And then after the short session of meditation, I'm going to answer a few more of the questions that folks asked about this morning about working with mental health, making our practice priorities, and the role of Sangha. So we'll talk about those as soon as we finish our first little meditation of the afternoon. One of the reasons I like to do these little sessions of meditation is because frequently when our mind is engaged in learning, we get very keen on something and our mind gets a little bit tight. And by mixing it up a little bit with periods of meditation, we just allow our mind to relax and to have more of a capacity to take in new information. So again, placing the body in the posture of meditation, we allow our body to sit momentarily in the posture of meditation. Creating with our hearts and minds the aspiration that we will practice meditation for the benefit of others. And then we'll sit for just a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes. Practicing the noticing, the letting go, and the returning. Okay, as before, following Situ Rinpoche's advice, we'll just take a moment to slowly come back to wakefulness of the present moment. Okay, so I'd like to spend the next couple of minutes addressing some of the questions that came up this morning about things that people would like to hear more about. And I think that the easiest one to address is the mental health. Actually, that's the most difficult one to address, but it's probably the best one to address first, is the question of mental health. I myself have suffered from anxiety my entire life, and I was always an anxious person. And so when I came to Dharma, I was very anxious about Dharma as well. Was I going to learn it well? Was I going to be a good practitioner, and so forth and so on? And my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, encouraged me to rely on the three sources of refuge, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, to rely on taking refuge in them as part of my initial and early practice of Buddhism. And I think that he probably knew that I had in my past, was raised Christian, had relied on prayer and a relationship with God as a way of finding reassurance in difficult times. And so what he said to me was, he said, when your mind feels unsteady, when your mind feels anxious, unsteady, and so forth, he said, think of the Buddha and pray to the Buddha. And that along with quiet sitting meditation were my initial practices in Buddha Dharma. So how that manifested for me was that in the background, I was working on my sitting meditation practice. But in everyday life, I was relying on the Buddha, so that when I would feel upset about something and so on, I would just think about the Buddha, which was really important, because if you've ever seen images of the sitting Buddha, Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, he's sitting with one hand in his lap, holding his begging bowl, but the other hand is touching the earth at his feet. And touching the earth beneath his meditation seat is an echo to what I feel meditation is about for me. And that's about groundedness. It's about grounding us in the moment, grounding us in our physical body, grounding us in our present awareness. And if we can do that grounding practice, then that's going to help us in the long term. But in the short term, if we think of the sitting Buddha, we will have a moment of inspiration. His Eminence Taisi Rinpoche used to say that when you meditate on an image of the Buddha, the best image of the Buddha is the image of the Buddha sitting in meditation with his left hand in his lap and the right hand touching the earth. He said, because that helps our thoughts to calm down just by looking at the iconographic image. Just by looking at that image, our thoughts begin to become grounded. And so that helped me a great deal in my life, working with anxiety. Now, those of you who are familiar with Mingyur Rinpoche, the great young master who's written his book, The Joy of Living, in The Joy of Living, Mingyur Rinpoche talks about his own struggles with anxiety and panic disorder. And that what meditation did was it first allowed him a method or technique for disengaging from the momentary upset of panic. But again, in the longer term, he said that the mechanism of meditation allowed him to see that the mind itself remained the same. His awareness, his mind remained the same. His mind's awareness remained the same no matter what he was engaged in doing, whether he was busy, whether he was idle, whether he was upset, whether he was calm. The basic backdrop of the mind remained the same. And by cultivating an awareness of mind's own awareness, he was able to, what's the right word? He was able to be present with his feelings while not going down the drain with them. So this is what I think, where I think meditation can help in mental health. Now, I personally do believe that mental health counseling and recovery is possible. Mental health issues can happen to anybody at any age, and being able to have a trusted counselor or source of support for that is really important. So what I tell people is that I'm not trained as a therapist, but I've been in therapy for more than 10 years, and I can tell you that it really helps to have someone to talk to and reflect back to. So I like to think of meditation as part of a good self-care plan. I don't think it's possible for us to look at meditation as being a cure-all, a be-all, end-all. It's very possible that if we have some difficulties, especially errors in thinking, or also intrusive thoughts, other types of organic mental illness, and so forth and so on, I think that if we can do this, if we can allow our mind to rest, that over time we will do well. And if we can apply the practices of mind training, over time we will do well. But in the moment, excuse me, in the moment of experiencing something, we may need to rely on our higher power. And for those of us who are familiar with 12-step recovery, we know that our higher power in Buddhism is the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. You'll have to excuse me for just a moment. Sometimes I have a dry spot in the back of my throat and I have to use a lozenge. So welcome to old age, the next phase of life. So in any case, I think of meditation as part of a good self-care regimen. I don't think it can totally replace proper mental health counseling, proper mental health medication, and so on. Because if we remember, in Shantideva's book, The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, he spoke eloquently about how the bodhisattvas would in the future appear as anything that would help beings. He said, until every illness has been healed, may I, the bodhisattva, myself, become the doctor, the nurse, and the medicine itself. So what this means is that we need to acknowledge that we may not know or have the solution to everything that's happening in our life, and that at some point we may need to rely on professional help. I think it's really, really important that we are able and capable of doing this, because I remember when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was living, he gave us a lot of advice when we were doing the 3-year retreat, when we finished the 3-year retreat, when he asked us to teach and become teaching lamas. He said that the 16th Karmapa, who died of cancer, and it was a cancer that he had ignored treatment for. He had ignored all of his symptoms and didn't see a doctor and so forth and so on, that he told Khenpo Rinpoche to make sure that he got good medical care and took care of himself. And so this means that even though we would like ideal, we might have the ideal in our mind that meditation will cure us of all illnesses and will take care of all of our needs, mental and physical. We have to recognize that because this world is an imperfect place and that our karma is continuously coming to fruition, that we may need to rely upon doctors, nurses, and medicines in order to bring ourselves back to health. So I know that may or may not be the answer that you might have been looking for, but as a person who has mental health issues, who is in counseling, who takes medication, and so forth and so on, I really do believe that for individuals for whom this works, they need to have access to those things and not think, well, I will not be considered a perfect Buddhist because I'm consulting with a counselor or I'm taking mental health medication or treatment. So I'm a person who believes in it. And maybe I'm the wrong person to give this advice to. And sometimes you need to interview several counselors before you find someone who works the way you like to work, but it's worth doing. So, but what my own therapist and I have talked about this, and what she said was that it is her belief, based on her understanding of mindfulness practices, which she has herself learned. She says that she believes that what mindfulness does is it allows us to interrupt a thought. It gives us the power to interrupt a thought and to redirect our attention to something more constructive. And in that way, she said, over time, it can have an impact on anxiety. And over time, it can have an impact on worry. And over time, it can have an impact on depression. But it's not a quick fix. And it's something that we have to remain committed to. So thank you so much for asking about mental health. I believe in it. I want everybody to have it. And I want everybody to have access to the tools they need to reach their optimum physical and mental health. And I see that in chat, someone asked about the book that that I was talking about, Mingyur Rinpoche. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you, Tanya, for putting The Joy of Living by Mingyur Rinpoche in the chat. Okay, so that was one of the questions. And then the other question that someone asked that I can answer right now is the question of how do we share with people we care about? How do we share mindfulness and the teachings with people while not using the language of Buddhism? And I'll say just a few words about that. We might think that we are inadequate to the task to share the Dharma. But my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, used to say, look, if you know with certainty, if you know one thing more than the person sitting next to you, you actually can share that Dharma with them. You can share the Dharma that you know with the person who is asking you questions. So he said, don't think that you need some sort of permission to share the Dharma that you know. But see, the key here is that it has to be something you know. You can't just talk about the blue sky ideas and make things up and say that you're helping someone with Dharma. You have to actually know. They have to ask you a question and you have to know the answer. He says, if someone asks you a question and you know the answer, it's actually sort of your duty to tell them and explain it to them as best you can. So that means all of us have the capacity to help others with Dharma. And I agree, using Dharma language is very confusing and it makes it sound really foreign to people. So I think mindfulness is itself a good way to talk about Dharma to people who are not Buddhist. You can just talk about the benefits you've had from mindfulness. You can talk about how it's allowed your thoughts to slow down enough so that you can begin to make better choices about what thoughts you entertain, right? Because when we're sitting and meditating, there's no way we're ever going to control all those thoughts that just bubble up from our subconscious. We're not going to be able to have control over that. But what we can slowly get control of is the second moment. First moment, no, but second moment, third moment, fifth moment, 80th moment, we can begin to get hold of those moments and then walk backward and begin to let go of the thoughts that are already in progress. We can think about those and let them go. We can notice them and let them go, and then place our attention on something more positive, which is why the mind training slogans exist, to give us an alternate soundtrack of thoughts, of self-talk that help. And so that was what my therapist thought the value in meditation and mindfulness was. And so what she told me then came out to my friends as, when they say, well, why are you so calm? I would say, well, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it could be because I meditate. And then I can tell them how meditation allows me to let go of thoughts and to redirect my attention to things that are healthier for me. So that's one way to talk about mindfulness. The other part is how to talk about love and compassion. I think that this is a little more difficult because love and compassion, everybody has their own ideas about what love and compassion are and what their power is. So what I'd like to say is that if someone is asking you, well, how do I deal with my anger? How do I deal with my worry? How do I deal with my upset? You can talk about mindfulness very simply. And you can also talk about love and compassion, because what I've come to understand is that whatever we hold on our mind is going to influence what we become. And so if we think of people with love and compassion, that's slowly going to be how we deal with the things that arise. And you can always invoke the patron Bodhisattva, Mr. Rogers, who said things like, if you can, today the quote that was brought to me was, something that is human is mentionable, and if it is mentionable, it can be managed. Meaning that anything that we feel anything we feel and can be meant. Wonderful quotation. And so Mr. Rogers will give us a lot of means to explain these concepts to others. And he often talked about how gratitude to the people who, in his words, who loved us into being, the gratitude that we feel can be turned into a sense of gratitude for all people, and an encouragement of all people to connect to their love and compassion. Because when we are connecting to love and compassion, we are connecting to the place where we as human beings are all equal and the same. If people are in conflict, they often are asked to think about common ground. What is their common ground? And His Holiness the Dalai Lama says their common ground is their shared humanity, and their shared wish to be happy, and their shared wish to be free of suffering. Shared humanity, shared wish to be happy, shared wish to be free of suffering. So these are ways to talk about why it's important to feel love for people and compassion for people, even when they act badly, because they're still someone's child and treasured by someone. And we have to think about what condemning people and criticizing people does to us. And then there is one more patron saint that we can invoke, and that is the patron saint Ted Lasso. Those of you who watch silly TV programs will know there is a comedy show that is full of language you would not repeat to your mother, but who has that has a lot of humor in which a lot of truth is placed. And my favorite illustration from that show is when the hero of the show, the coach, Ted Lasso, quotes Walt Whitman and says, "It is better to be curious instead of judgmental. Be curious instead of judgmental." So when we find ourselves judging others, we can begin to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? And what sort of thing are we doing? And what's happening? According to the teachings of the Buddha, when we judge other people, when we are placing ourselves in a position higher than theirs, and we are judging them from on high. And what does that do? That increases our own self-clinging and self-fixation, which, as you know from our teachings on the Four Noble Truths, remember that second noble truth? First one is suffering's part of life. Second is suffering has a cause. Third is that it has a solution. And the fourth is the path. We've been mainly emphasizing the path so far today, but I can say something about the second, which is the cause of suffering, according to the teachings of the Buddha, is clinging and fixation. And what we cling to and are fixated on the most is our self-concept, me and I. And so when we judge others, we are increasing our self-fixation. And the Buddha said that self-fixation is at the heart of all of our mental afflictions. Our worry, our fear, our anger is all rooted in self-clinging. And when self-clinging is activated, when the switch is flipped and our self-clinging is activated, we tend to act in high-handed and negative ways toward others and judgmental ways toward others. So those are some easy words that you can use with people who are suffering and want to know about what's different about your life. Number one, if I seem calm, it's because I practice it every day on my meditation seat through the practice of mindfulness meditation. Secondly, mindfulness gives me some space. It shows me the space between my thoughts. And in that space, I can begin to make better choices about what thoughts I entertain and think about. And then finally, I choose to believe that all of us as human beings want the same thing, that we all want to be happy. No one wants to suffer. And that when I act in a negative way toward others, I'm just increasing my selfishness, which makes me unhappier. And so hopefully those will help. And you can say, I also find that love is the best way to connect with other people, even if it's just the simplest kind of love, which is the wish for another person to be happy. My husband Mike is just a great guy, and he teaches me Dharma every day in the fact that his main practice is kindness. When he is on the phone with the many kinds of people we can interact with on the phone, he always makes a point of saying their name back to them. They said, hello, this is Teresa. I will be your helper today. He makes sure that at some point he says the name and says and thanks them for being there and helping. So he says, I like to think that I'm giving that person one good customer that they will be able to talk about that evening. Wow, I had a customer that made my day easier. So this is the kind of thing that we can do that's simple, and it doesn't require Dharma words. So thank you for asking about that. So I think that then there are two more questions, which is how to challenge yourself to get better at your Dharma practice, and then the role of Sangha and finding joy. Okay, so we got a few more to cover today. All right, this afternoon, I'm going to share something that I wrote a while back, and this will help to anchor us. Oh, by the way, I had one little technical thing to share. Remember I was talking about self-clinging? I meant to share with you the teaching that Pema Chodron shares. She shares a teaching in her book, No Time to Lose. And because I'm going to do books here in a minute. And she basically talks about something called that she learned from her teacher, Zikar Kongtrul, which is about something called, Shenpa. Shenpa is self being the self being hooked by something. And she says that this Shenpa, or this being hooked, is what happens when those thoughts have gotten away from us. Our thoughts have gotten away from us, and we've started telling ourselves a story about what's going on. I am the hero of my own story, and I am now suffering because this person is doing this thing, and this person is doing this thing, and I'm suffering because of all these external people, and so forth and so on. Well, when we tell ourselves the story that we're always the center of, and we get hooked by something, that is when we start to act in ways that are unhelpful. So then I tell people that how to recognize when Shenpa is happening to you. How do you know when Shenpa is happening to you? How to recognize it? You will feel tension somewhere in your body. You're going to feel like, yeah, you'll tighten up, which you could feel as a tightening. And it's like you might feel mentally confused or upset. And if you look deeply into what's going on, you will know that those moments are the moments that you need to dig in and start working with your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. That's the moment where you got to get in there and do something. And I'm really glad that I had to, I remembered to do this. It was on my outline, but I forgot it. Because this is going to help us as we move deeper into the question of how to deepen our Dharma practice, is that ultimately what mindfulness and alertness do is alerts us to the presence of Shenpa and gives us the opportunity to counteract it. Usually the counteraction is bodhicitta. Either love and compassion, or wisdom, an understanding of wisdom and emptiness. Okay, so I wanted to make sure I mentioned that because it's gonna come in handy later on. Okay. All right. So let's talk about books. A lot of people come to me and they say, "What are the best Dharma books to read?" And then I have some favorites. Dharma Paths by Khenpo Karthon Rinpoche is the one I recommend the most. This, of course, is the first edition, and the subsequent editions have painting and illustrations on the cover, as well as the dream flag of His Holiness Karmapa. And what's good about this book is that if you read it once, you'll say, "Wow, nice book." If you read it twice, you'll find things that you missed the first time. And if you read it 3 times, you will find that you suddenly become able to answer most of your friends' questions about Buddhism, because it covers life of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths. It covers how to meditate, giving step-by-step instructions and the reason why we give those step-by-step instructions. He talks about mindfulness. He talks about the path of bodhicitta and love and compassion. And then he talks about the 6 perfect virtues. The the generosity, the ethics, the patience, the diligence, the meditation, and the wisdom practices that can help us achieve Buddhahood. But if you would like to have, and by the way, he does this with this incredibly clever callback that he does. In chapter 1, Rinpoche talks about how people find the life story of the Buddha sometimes unsettling because it says such things as he could walk when he was a baby, and he could and that where he walked when he took his first 7 steps on the earth, lotus flowers blossomed. Well, you know, he says, I know that a lot of people who hear this find that somewhat unbelievable. He said, but taking the steps toward Buddhahood, by explaining all of the steps that one takes toward Buddhahood and the accomplishment of Buddhahood and the power of Buddhahood, then he says in the last chapter of the book, he says, now, do you see why that seemingly impossible thing of lotus flowers arising where the Buddha walked, how that can be possible? So I thought that was a really clever, it's a wonderful book, and I hope that you can find a way to get a hold of it. Another book that I like to read is books on mind training. And my favorite book on mind training, as those of you who know me know, is The Great Path of Awakening. And this is, and it's by Jangön Khantrul. What I like about this book is that it is extremely deep. You can read this book many, many times because the writing is so dense. The actual text of the book is this much. This is how much, this is actually how long it is. It's very short, but it's very powerful. And if you say, wow, short and powerful might be too confusing for me, how do I learn love and compassion when I can't quite understand what he's talking about? Then this book is your next guide. It's called The 7-Point Mind Training. And it's by Trungpa Rinpoche. Okay. I'm seeing, by the way, I'm observing that there are some problems happening with the picture. Are we having some problems with me going in and out? Are we having some network problems? Yes, no?
Lama Kathy, one person reported that to me. I don't know if it's a pervasive issue. It could be on the user end too. It's possible.
See, other problems, we can stop for a moment. We'll cross our fingers and hope that we can carry on. If it continues to be a problem, you can report in to the, okay.
People are saying occasionally. So okay. Yeah, if it gets to be a real problem, we could always have you go out and come back in again, because sometimes that helps. Okay.
Yeah, the other thing I can do is I can try to change my network, and sometimes that makes it worse and sometimes it makes it better. So the and if it's been happening in the afternoon and it didn't happen in the morning, then it's a network problem here at home. Okay. So the 7-Point Mind Training by Trungpa Rinpoche, that book really helps people to understand the basics of mind training. And so these are my 2 favorite mind training books, along with a book called The 37 Practices of a Bodhisattva. My favorite commentary is by Sotra. And so these books are good for people who want to learn about mindfulness and want to learn about the what are called the thought transformation. And so in any case, these are some books that I really like. Oh, there's one more that I've enjoyed a lot. And that, and like, well, let's see. I'm thinking that's maybe where I'm going to stop for book recommendations at the moment, because we have to remember that when we're first involved in Dharma, we need a lot of basics. And so these books, I think, really help with the basics. And so when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche taught his students, he mainly taught them through these means, through by mind training literature and other methods. He didn't do a lot of Mahamudra instruction to beginning students, so you won't see in my recommendations any Mahamudra books, because he wanted people to approach Mahamudra slowly and carefully. And so, yeah, here we go again. I see it's my end. It looks like the problem's happening at my end. I'm going to take a second here to change networks and see if that helps. We'll see if that helps, and if it does, great. If not, that's okay. Okay, so this is a little bit about basic beginners books. All right, so another person, let's see how we do on time. Okay, it's not quite time for our break, but we're getting closer. So another thing that people asked about were about how we progress in practice. People wanted to know what our priorities in practice should be and how we should progress. And for that, we need a teacher. A teacher represents a specific lineage of practice. All those books that I just showed you, of course, you can learn a lot about Dharma from books. But the problem with books is that they won't tell you if you're making a mistake in your meditation. They won't tell you if you're becoming, I know that this morning someone's expressed worries about being prideful. I mean, you know, a book won't necessarily tell you, hey, you need to knock that off. So this is where having a teacher will be really, really important. And so making a connection with a teacher would be a great way to deepen your Dharma practice. And if you want to do that, you have to understand that each teacher represents a particular lineage of practice. We have all received our vow of refuge and all of our instructions from a master who then received it from their master, who then received it from their master, and on up the staircase to the Buddha personally. And that's why when I give the refuge vow, it kind of touches me to remind people that the vow of refuge is a living tradition that has been given from spiritual generation to generation, like one candle lighting the another through history. From the time of the Buddha, that's 2,600 years until now, that's the lineage of the refuge vow that I received. And so being part of that lineage it's a powerful thing, because it's almost as though the inspiration of that is alive, coming down to us, one candle lighting another through history. And the power of the teaching continues because we don't just receive the teachings, we practice the teachings. And when we practice the teachings, we have an impact from that. And when we have an impact from that, we become capable of helping others. So this is what happens. I remember people ask me, how did you get started in Buddhism? I say, well, I was inspired by my own stress to take a yoga class in college. And from yoga, I learned how to meditate. And then I developed the wish to find a teacher. And not too long after finding a teacher, I mean, after forming that wish, I read a chapter in a book by Ram Dass called Grist for the Mill, where he talked about lineage. He said lineage is really, really important. He said, of course, you can create your own religion. He said, I did that. But he said, I don't recommend that to you. To you, I recommend that you find a lineage that traces its history back to an original enlightened being, and then practice that to its conclusion. And so this is why I do recommend lineage, that a person find a teacher who represents a particular lineage, and that they then work with that teacher to learn that lineage of blessing and practice, and to practice that. Because the teacher will help you with several things. The teacher will help you to stay focused on what's important, how to set aside things that might take you off your path, because believe it or not, our mind can be confused sometimes. We might be the kind of person who is inspired by everything we see. Wow, that's a great practice. I want to do that. Wow, that's a great practice. I want to do that. Wow, that's a great practice. I want to do that. And if we try to do all those things we feel inspired to do, we might waste some time. We might waste a little bit of time and not be able to practice properly and not progress well. So finding a teacher is part of how we deepen our Dharma practice, because we allow the teacher to speak to us directly, and we allow the teacher to tell us what we need to know, what practices are best for us, what things to think about are best for us, and so on. So the teacher then in that way can help us to avoid pitfalls and focus. Focus and avoid pitfalls. Those are the two things that teachers can do. So that's a little bit about finding a teacher. Now, some people say, how do I find a teacher? Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche basically said that a teacher would, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Bartoka Rinpoche once said that the best way to find a teacher is to do your Dharma practice. Actually meditate. And he said, and your meditation practice will actually change your karma, and it will bring you into contact with many teachers. And from among the teachers you meet, you should start asking questions like, how should I practice? What should I do? And he said, and from among those, you will find your branch teachers. Their advice will help you. And then as you begin to focus your practice more, eventually you will find a teacher whose advice helps you absolutely the most. And that person will become your root teacher. Some people have more than one. I was lucky to have Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche for more than 40 years as the person who was my main teacher. And he passed away in 2019, and I miss him a lot, miss his wisdom and so forth and so on. But this is a little bit of an information about how you find a teacher. You start with your practice. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said that teachers, you have to watch for teachers to have qualities. He said a good teacher, he said, will be a person who you have confidence in, a person you trust, and a person who is available to you. He said confidence means you're confident that they know what they're talking about. Trust means that you're willing to entrust your spiritual care to them. And available means available, that they can be present for you to answer your questions. I mean, everyone would love to have the Dalai Lama or His Holiness Karmapa as their teacher, because we definitely got the trust, the confidence going. We definitely would have the trust going, but there's an availability issue. Sometimes we have to go with the teacher who is available to us. That's what Khenpo Rinpoche said. He said, well, your karma brought you here, so try it out, see if it helps you. And if it doesn't, well, then you know. The other thing that Rinpoche said about teachers is that they themselves have to have relatively more qualities than faults. That he said, Trungpa Rinpoche said it this way. He said, most teachers are a mixture of qualities and faults. Our job is to pick a teacher who has relatively more qualities than faults and to practice their qualities and not practice their faults. So that's a little bit about how to find a teacher and how you can have a relationship with a teacher to help you deepen your Dharma practice. Before we take a break, I'd like to see what questions there are out there. Do folks have questions about the matter at hand, which is deepening the Dharma practice through finding a teacher, deepening your Dharma practice by recognizing thoughts and working with thoughts, deepening Dharma practice in all of these different ways. Does anybody have like questions or comments or? Okay, there's a person who's asked a question and let's see. Oh yeah, somebody is commenting that advice about how teachers and students work together. Yeah, the Khenpo Rinpoche used the analogy of a bee and a flower. He said the teacher is like the flower and then the student is the bee. That the student goes to the teacher to get instructions and then goes and practices the instruction, like the bee goes to the flower for nectar and pollen and then goes back to the hive to create honey. So I love that image of that of the teacher being the flower and the student being the bee. And this helps to explain why your teacher doesn't hover over you. The flower does not hover over the bee saying, hey, you need anything? And this is why the responsibility on the student is in some ways greater than the responsibility on the teacher, because the responsibility on the student is to know when to go back for instruction, right? To know when to consult. So thanks for that. Then someone's asking about, does one's teacher need to be a Lama? No, not necessarily. You can, in fact, there's a book in which Gampopa, this book, I'm not sure I'm going to recommend this book to beginners because it's like really big and it's really complicated. It's called The Jewel Ornament of Liberation. This is the Khenpo Kunchuk Jaltsen Rinpoche translation. It's my favorite of the three translations that I have because it's the clearest, and plus there's a lot of stuff in the back of the book that explains some of the similes and metaphors that are used by Gampopa in the book. So, but in any case, in that book, he says, of course, he says the best teacher is a fully awakened Buddha, but you may not find one of those. You might not find a fully awakened Buddha. But he said, next best, partially awakened Bodhisattva. That's the next best teacher. Third best, he said, is an ordinary being who's not enlightened, who possesses patience, compassion, and learning. So you don't have to be a Lama to be a teacher necessarily, but you do need to have whoever is your teacher should have a teacher of their own. If they claim that they don't have a teacher and don't need a teacher, watch out, because that could be what they're going to impart to you, that you can be your own teacher and so on, and that teachers aren't necessary. So you have to watch out, be careful. Look at the teacher and see if their thoughts and words match. I mean, their actions and words match and so on. Let's see. So the word Lama La means insurpassable, and Ma means mother. So they're like an insurpassable parent for sentient beings. And let's see, is there a terminology in the teacher levels, Lama versus Rinpoche versus? Yes. For that, we're going to go to, I'm going to go on for another 3 minutes, and then I'm going to give you your break. Sorry about that. I did forget. I got that close to the break and forgot. All right. There are monastics. There are lamas. There are kempos. There are, I'm going to put kempos and geshes in the same. And they're scholars. And then Rinpoches. This is only a partial list. There are not all lamas are monastics. Some lamas are lay people. That's me, for example. I'm not a monastic, but I'm a lay person, and I'm a holder of the 5 lay precepts. Monastics have taken vows that they will remain simple, have a simple life, and follow many, many precepts of behavior in order to practice and study the Dharma. And from among the monastics and lay people you meet, some of them will undergo the training to become lamas. Each of the lineages trains their lamas differently. So I can only speak about the Karma Kagyu tradition that I'm part of. In the Karma Kagyu, they do a 3-year retreat. That's how they train their lamas. They have them go into retreat, and it's usually a group retreat led by another lama. And then they practice a specific set of curriculum, of practice and study curriculum for 3 years. And you don't get vacations, don't get to go home, no visitors. It's actually really cool. I did it, and I'm so grateful. And then Kempos, and Kempo is what a Kagyu lineage teacher and a Nyingma teacher who undergoes instruction, intense scholastic instruction. Geshe is the same name for the Gelugpa tradition. So we'll just focus on the Karma Kagyu. There's also another level called Acharya. There are Western Acharyas and there are Eastern Acharyas. The Eastern ones have to memorize, I believe, more than 12 books of Dharma. Memorize them all and be quizzed on them. Kempos need to memorize more than 30 books and be quizzed on them. Yeah, they have to undergo exams. They have to be able to quote from memory specific portions and then explain them. And so the person who is an Acharya or a Kempo has invested more than 10 years of their life in learning these texts and being able, I jokingly call Kempos a monastery in a box, because you could plant this one individual somewhere and then a monastery could spring up around them because they know that much. And then finally, Rinpoche, it's a title that's given. It means precious teacher. It's given by one's own spiritual superior. Your students may call you Rinpoche or something like that, but you're not really a Rinpoche until your teacher acknowledges that you've achieved some qualities from your practice. So I'll say that for you. Let's see that let me answer one more question for you. In the Tibetan tradition, is there a formal Dharma transmission? Yes, there is. Yeah, there are Dharma transmissions there of many types. There are reading transmissions where books are read to you by your teacher. Yes, nuns are female monastics, someone asks. And so, yes, there are reading transmissions, there are empowerments that are given. Those are types of transmission that are given in the Tibetan tradition. And then the mind transmissions are given after one has completed a set of preliminaries. And often these transmissions are called pointing out instructions. But it's not quite as formal as in the Zen tradition. The Zen tradition transmission is a bigger deal. We do it a little bit differently over here. Okay, because of time and that I do want you to get your break, let's stop here for the moment. And then when we come back, I want to talk about how we progress in our practice. How do we, what levels do we go from here to here to here to here? And then also, how is it that a person practices, how is it that they practice all of these things we've been talking about? How do they prioritize their teachings? And how do they approach Mahamudra practice? And so that'll be what I talk about in the last section. And again, if you have any questions that haven't been answered, go ahead and take part of the break and type them into chat. And then I'll get to them. I'll get to them when we finish the next part of the presentation. So when we come back, we'll meditate for a bit and then do more questions. So I'm going. It is now 13 minutes past the hour. I will see you at 18 minutes past the hour. So thanks, everyone. Well, I hope you had a good break. Thanks for coming back. We're going to do another short meditation now, just to kind of allow our minds to come to a little bit more of rest. And then I noticed that in chat, it was mentioned that I needed to cover mantra, because you're right, I did forget to do that. So I will do that immediately when we finish this, and then we'll go to the final questions and so on. Okay, here we go. Placing our body in the posture of meditation. We form the mental motivation that we're going to practice for the benefit of sentient beings. Taking this little time of retreat for ourselves today and refreshing our minds with meditation. His Holiness Karmapa said that that our mind is our true home, and that meditation is a returning to our true home. And I know several people have mentioned to me their sadness at the passing of the great Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh in the last day or so, and that we can think of and honor him by practicing our own moment of presence. So let's sit quietly for just about 5 minutes and refresh our mind and come home to our mind. Placing your body in the posture of meditation, forming the intention, and then following the breath in and out to develop our mindfulness and attention. Okay. Now, arising from the meditation, we make the aspiration that we can carry this mindfulness into the next portion of our day. Okay. I was asked to, I was reminded about the practice of meditation and to talk a little bit about that. So when we talk about mantra, we're talking about a type or a style of practice. And this is a type of practice where we use visualization and sacred mantra or prayer to create a sense of connection. We'll just call it that way, to our Buddha nature. As you know, many of us have studied Buddhism already, and we know that the Buddha taught that all beings have a mind and that mind has the potential to know itself and to know itself completely. And that this capacity for awakening is called our Buddha nature. The mind is aware and it can be aware of itself. And it can deepen that understanding of and awareness of itself to the point where there is an experience called enlightenment or liberation or Buddhahood, and that we all have the potential to accomplish this. Mantra practice is a great way to deepen your Dharma practice because it crosses over from the meditation seat to daily life. All of these things that we've been talking about today have that potential to cross over and to become part of everyday life. And those of you who are familiar with mantra practice may have known the practice called Chenrezig, which is spelled either with a K or with a G. Chenrezig is the Bodhisattva of compassion. And his is the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, which can be pronounced as Om, Om Mani Padme Hum in Tibetan. Whether you pronounce it in Sanskrit, Om Mani Padme Hum, or Tibetan, Om Mani Padme Hum, the meaning is the same. Om refers to the enlightened, didn't want to shout at you there, the enlightened body of the Buddha. And then Ma is the, I'm sorry, Mani is means jewel. And Padme means lotus. Hum is the enlightened mind of the Buddha. So this is a way of saying Chenrezig's name. Mani refers to the jewel that he is depicted as holding in his hand that symbolizes Buddha nature, that if we realize and liberate ourselves through working with our Buddha nature, that we then have all of our wishes granted, so to speak, just as the wish granting jewel of legend. They didn't have a magic lamp in their culture. They had a magic wishing jewel. And so the wishing jewel in this case is our Buddha nature, which can bring happiness to us and others when our Buddha nature is unveiled. Lotus or Padme is a lotus, and this symbolizes the Bodhisattva who is rooted in this world but blooms above it, just as the lotus is rooted in the mud and blooms above it. So the one who holds the jewel and lotus is a way of saying Chenrezig's name. And by reciting this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, we call upon Chenrezig to be present with us, and we ask for his blessings. So this is a way of doing bringing the practice to your everyday life. Mantra practice is best approached using what are called the 3 permission blessings. We can go to our teacher and request, we can request the reading transmission, which is the transmission of the text. And we can also receive the empowerment, where a person who has done a lot of the practice then blesses our body, speech, and mind, and gives us the permission to visualize ourselves as that Buddha. So the reading transmission is permission to study the text. The empowerment is the permission to visualize ourselves as the Buddha or Bodhisattva of the practice. And the practical instruction is how to visualize and how to chant. So these are they're called the 3 permission blessings that activate our capacity to do a mantra practice. Now there's a different set of permission blessings for each of them. You can do it for Chenrezig practice, for Tara practice, for Manjushri practice, for Medicine Buddha practice, and so on. But once you have received these, then you can begin to use the mantra practice as an everyday practice that you will take off your cushion and do in your daily life. Now, we're very fortunate that that there are 2 mantra practices that are accessible and open to all, whether you have the reading transmission or not, or even whether you're a Buddhist or not. And these are the practice of Chenrezig and the practice of Medicine Buddha. Khepo-Karthar Rinpoche and Trungpa Rinpoche have said that these 2 practices are so beneficial and so powerful that you don't even have to be a Buddhist to do them. And so these are the 2 that I teach the most widely. And those of you who are interested, the Columbus KTC will be presenting I'll call it a triple header. We are going to teach we're going to teach 3 mantra practices simultaneously on our 3 Zoom channels, February the 5th on Saturday. It's the first Saturday of the Tibetan New Year. And of course, everything that happens after in the first 15 days of the Tibetan New Year, the Buddhist New Year, have more power and more benefit. So we're going to do a triple header on Saturday, February I said 5th, I believe that's right. And we're going to teach Chenrezig, Medicine Buddha, and Green Tara all at once. So you have to pick one, but that's okay. In a few months' time, we will do it again. And we'll have 3 different, maybe 3 the same, maybe 3 different. I don't know. We've got like 4 or 5 to teach. And so we're going to find a way eventually to teach all of them simultaneously. That way, everybody will be able to come and learn about mantra practice and how it's done. So anyway, that's just a little preview of something that's coming up. Now you might ask, well, that's all great, but like, how does a mantra practice translate to your everyday life? I mean, as one person said to me, I look in the mirror and I don't look like Chenrezig. You know, how is that? How does that help? How does that work exactly? Well, it's because we have 3 things. We have a body, we have speech, and we have mind. And right now, they're rather confused, and we'll just say we have confusion and delusion about them. We think they're solid, real, permanent, unchanging. And in the practice of mantra, we substitute the body made of light for the body of flesh and blood. Our speech is, I'm going to say, I'm going to go to different. It's a body of light, but it's called the union of appearance and emptiness. And speech will be like an echo. It is the union of sound and emptiness. And mind, we think of as wisdom, the union of awareness and emptiness. And so once we learn how to practice like this, we learn how to visualize Chenrezig first as being above our head, and we pray to him and ask for his blessing. Then we imagine that he gives us the blessing that we then transform into Chenrezig, and that all the beings in the world are Chenrezig, which is great if you have people you're disagreeing with, because you can turn them into Chenrezig. It's a really powerful way to work with folks that you've got problems with. And so we imagine that all of us are Chenrezig and that all of us are reciting Om Mani Padme Hum together, and that the whole world is filled with love and compassion. And by doing this, we transform our sense of who we think we are, this self that we cling to so much. We turn it into an enlightened view. And then at the end of the practice, we dissolve the entire visualization into emptiness and rest there, giving us an opportunity to experience our mind as it is, our Buddha nature as it is. And then after that, we re-arise as the Buddha or as the Bodhisattva. And then we get up and walk around and go benefit beings, which means that we can have a Chenrezig moment at any time. We could be washing the dishes and suddenly, poof, we think of ourselves as being made of light, washing the dishes for the benefit of sentient beings. We could be raking the leaves as the Bodhisattva. We can be answering the phone as the Bodhisattva. We can be interacting with our loved ones as the Bodhisattva. We can have this moment of transformation in any situation in our life. It's open to us and possible for us to switch over into. It's like changing the channels on your radio. And the other benefit to this having moments throughout the day when we can visualize ourselves as Buddhas or Bodhisattvas is that allows us to strengthen our view of awakening as being a possibility for us. And at the very least, and by the way, those of you who are interested, I am actually copying absolutely every screen that I am doing on screen share or on the whiteboard, and I will put them all in a single file and you can download them all together. And mantra is sometimes called a protection for the mind. And the reason it's called that is that when we are thinking our usual thoughts that have confusion and delusion, we can get sucked into a vortex of worry or anger or whatever. But at any moment, we could key into the mantra instead. We could be busy going down the drain of worry or going down the drain of anger or whatever, and suddenly we think about and then talk about, speak the mantra and think about the mantra and place our attention on the mantra so that we, I guess you could say, we redirect. Remember the redirecting of thought while we're sitting on our meditation seat? We have a thought, it distracts us. We recognize it, we label it thinking, we let it go, and then return our attention to the breath for a fresh start. We can do exactly the same thing with mantra practice. Mantra can be that practice that we do that counteracts the spin down the drain and becomes an aspiration for goodness. So what is possible for us is possible for us because of mindfulness and alertness. It all goes back to mindfulness and alertness, which allows us to engage these protections and methods. If we have mindfulness and alertness, we can be alert and attentive to mantra practice. We can be alert and attentive to love and compassion practice. We can transform anything in the moment if we practice mindfulness and alertness. And we have to notice what's going on in the mind and then make a choice, a conscious choice to do something different. Not always easy, not always possible, but it's worth trying. It's better than the alternative, is kind of the way I look at it. So thank you to the folks who asked me to cover mantra practice, because mantra has been really helpful for me. I met a gentleman once who learned about Om Mani Padme Hung, and he was asking questions in a gathering like this one day. And he said, sometimes I'm riding the subway in my city, and I see all the bad stuff that's happening around me, and I get angry about it. Is it okay for me to mentally recite Om Mani Padme Hung while that's happening? He said, because it helps me. And I said, absolutely, definitely. There's no question about it. It's fine to do that. It's fine to engage that, because it's a skillful means that helps us to understand what is possible for us. And eventually, when we learn practices like Mahamudra, we will actually be able to use that mindfulness and alertness to allow us to notice and to experience in the moment mind's nature, which is hovering in the background of every thought, every emotion, every experience, every perception. Our basic Buddha nature is there at all times. It never leaves us, but we need to be reminded of its presence. And mantra is one of the ways to do that. Does anybody have any questions about that? You can feel free to type into chat or to unmute and ask the question. Okay, not hearing any questions. We'll talk a little bit about what's next. A lot of folks want to know, well, like, what's the path? How do you do it? Most of us begin with shamatha practice, where we learn mindfulness and alertness. Yes, Helder is asking, Om Mani Padme Hum is Tibetan, and Om Mani Padme Hum, H-U-M, is the Sanskrit. Let's see, mindfulness and then we'll practice Lojong, which is learning to train the mind in love and compassion. You can see how these two work together. When we learn mindfulness and alertness, it's very easy then to learn Lojong, the training in love and compassion. And the main practice is called the practice of Tonglen, sending and receiving. In meditation, we sit and we imagine that with the out-breath, we give goodness to beings. And on the in-breath, we imagine that we remove suffering from beings. And this training of our mind in love on the out-breath and compassion on the in-breath begins to subtly change our perception of our self-fixation. It begins to subtly allow us to change gears from being only self-fixated to being aware of others. And so the practice of Tonglen is something else that we can do to deepen our Dharma practice. Tonglen and Lojong go together to help us put others increase our appreciation for the suffering of others and put their interests in our mind. And then this is how Khenpo Rinpoche would have us train people. He had us teach shamatha first, lojong second, and mantra practice could be taught at any time. The Chenrezig mantra specifically. Some people like mantras, some people don't. But then after that, we would learn Mahamudra. Mahamudra is the main method of meditation in tranquility and insight. In the Kagyu tradition, it's the main method of meditation for attainment of Buddhahood. So this is the progression: shamatha, lojong. Mantra practice is kind of intermediate; it can be taught anytime, and then Mahamudra practice. Mahamudra practice can be taught in several different ways. Many people will have heard of the practice called Nundro, which means preliminary. And when a person takes refuge multiple times, does many purification mantras, makes many offerings, and forges a bond with their teacher through the practice of Guru Yoga, the Mahamudra then can be given as a transmission from one person to another. But even people who are not in a position to do Nundro can approach Mahamudra practice by going to their teacher and asking, because mantra practice and lojong practice both can be methods of approach for Mahamudra. And all you need to do is talk to your teacher about how that is possible. There are lots of ways these practices can be adjusted and made to work. And so, for example, several of my Dharma friends went to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche and said, I just really don't think that I'm going to be able to do the Nundro practice. What should I do? And he always gave them a mantra practice to do. Someone in chat is asking about when pointing out instruction happens. It happens after the Mahamudra preliminaries are given, and are completed. Usually pointing out is given at that time, but not all teachers give it. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche himself did give it on occasion, but he taught several different methods of Mahamudra that rely on step-by-step instructions in Mahamudra techniques and methods. He said in one of his teachings in Columbus, Ohio, when he taught here about Mahamudra, he said, a lot of folks put a lot of emphasis on the pointing out instruction. And he said, and yes, it can be very helpful. But for some people, he said, it's actually not helpful. And it makes them feel confused. And so he said, sometimes it's better to work with your teacher through the step-by-step instructions that they received from their teacher and go through those step-by-step instructions. And he said, in that way, they point out the nature of their mind for themselves. And he said, takes a little longer, but he said it's a little more effective in the long run. So here we are. So you asked the question that was asked at the beginning of this workshop today. How are we doing on time? Do I have a few more minutes? Yes, I do. Was how do we deepen our Dharma practice? And the answer to that is by practicing mindfulness and alertness. We recognize that basic shamatha meditation allows us to work with our minds in ways we were never able to work with them before. And working with them both on the cushion and off, we are building a bridge of mindfulness and alertness that allows us to practice mindfulness in everyday life. It allows us to train our mind in love and compassion through the practice of Tonglen, and allows us to use mantra to remember our Buddha nature at any moment of the day, and also the practice of Mahamudra, which will help us to cut through the self-fixation that causes Shenpa at any moment of the day. If a person has learned the Mahamudra practice, then they're able to recognize mind's nature in the midst of emotion. They're able to recognize mind's nature in the midst of even worry and agitation. They're able to recognize mind's nature in the moment of fear. They're able to recognize mind's nature in the moment of feeling overwhelmed. And through these practices, they're able to recognize the fact that their mind's nature is present for them at all times, and that they can touch it and be with it and merge with it at any time. And so when we talk about deepening practice, we talk about making a commitment to ourselves to study and practice the Dharma. We make the decision to change our attitudes, and we go and meet teachers and use our relationships with teachers in order to help us progress. And helping us to progress, then we begin to help others. So we can deepen our Dharma practice and be present with our practice mainly through mindfulness, practicing mindfulness and alertness, and then implanting the attitude that wishes to bring about the benefit for everyone we encounter. Several people commenting about Thich Nhat Hanh on social media today said that his value was that he actually embodied love. He actually embodied love and compassion as a person. He embodied these. And how does a person become an embodiment of love and compassion? Through this kind of deepening of practice, so that it becomes our wall-to-wall experience. And that comes from making the profound wish to be of benefit to beings, and then undertaking the practices that allow us to benefit beings. So I guess that's all for the moment in terms of our time. I will hold everybody after class for an additional 5 minutes to have one more little 5-minute meditation. But in the meantime, I'd like to spend the next 6 minutes doing Q&A. Someone is asking, what's the significance of 1 bell versus 3? It's my forgetfulness. You should, we usually at Columbus KTC, we usually start with 3 and end with 3. And then in the middle, when we are stopping meditation, we hit it once or twice. And it's just, there may be a significance to it, but I don't know what it is. It's just the custom we've undertaken. So, and I didn't even do it right today. So sorry about that. Other questions that people may want to know about. First of all, glad that you all came today. Taking little times like this out for yourself, I think it's a great gift to give yourself. It's a really great gift to give yourself this time away. You know, you tell your family, I love you, but I gotta have some me time. And this is a really good me time. How to discern a teacher for Mahamudra. Okay. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, while he was alive, he gave Mahamudra instruction, and he authorized some of us to give it, some of his students to give it. And so how to discern, I would say the same way you discern any other teacher's qualities. You have to listen to them speak. You have to ask them questions. You have to get a sense of who they are as a person, get a sense of if their actions and their words match. And I think that's really a good thing to think about. When Khenpo Karthar was alive, he was asked several times if there were specific masters he would direct students to. And he said, well, of course, His Holiness Karmapa and His Eminence Taisi Rinpoche, he said, they're masters of karma. You can ask them any question and trust any answer they give. But not all of us could go to India to take advantage of seeing His Eminence Taisi Rinpoche. And of course, right now, His Holiness Karmapa is still in retreat. So, so that would not be practical. But what I can also tell you is that in individual interviews, Khenpo Rinpoche often would send his students to other teachers to learn Mahamudra. And the two he chose the most often, actually the three he chose the most often, were His Eminence Siddha Rinpoche, Trungpa Rinpoche, and Mingyur Rinpoche. So these three teachers were people that I heard him send others to. But he may have sent them to other masters, because there are several other masters he could send them to. But that's what he did in individual interviews with some of the people I spoke to. People asked, well, can I get this instruction? Can I get this instruction? And he would tell them to attend one of the Mahamudra programs put on by Siddha Rinpoche or Trungpa Rinpoche or Mingyur Rinpoche. That's generally what happens. Someone's asking, is Mahamudra instruction given individually from a teacher to a student or in group teachings? They can be done either way. But in my experience, I've received them in both individually and in groups, and they're really effective in both settings. But it's really important to have a good bodhisattva motivation on board. So from my point of view, the best teachings are ones where you and the teacher understand what's going on. You're not just sitting in a lecture. You're not just sitting in a lecture hearing something that could become an object of intellect. You're actually talking with a teacher who is telling you, this is how you need to meditate like this. And then you get to come back and tell them your experience, and then they get to make corrections on what you are doing properly, and to bolster what you're doing properly, to change things that aren't proper. And so to me, learning Mahamudra is not like sitting in one lecture. It's continuously having a conversation with a teacher where they can help you overcome obstacles and increase your understanding. So I hope that helps. Someone is asking, can you give a short, healthy sense of self that replaces ego clinging self? Oh yeah, absolutely. It's called taking the Bodhisattva vow. If a person takes the Bodhisattva vow, they give themselves a new identity. They identify as a Bodhisattva in training, so that now everything they do is, although because of habit, it may still come from self-clinging. They are trying, and they're building the idea that they are a bodhisattva in training, and that everything that they do is part of their training. Does that make sense? Yeah, I see you nodding. So it's like, yes, okay, good. Yeah. And so that replaces the ego clinging self-concept. Those of you who have read mind training literature, such as The Great Path of Awakening, know that mind training literature uses several interesting devices. One is exaggeration, another is irony, and yet a third method it uses is it creates a fictional character called ego clinging, and then you scold it. Oh, you ego clinging, you've been so bad to me, and so on. This way you're not scolding yourself and being mad at yourself. You're being realistic about and honest about your habits. That, oh yeah, my learned habits of ego fixation are what I'm working on now. This is what I'm working with. And that way we don't end up disliking ourselves, because after all, we have Buddha nature. So we have to do this carefully. Other questions that people might have, I'm going to look to folks who want to ask on microphone. You can keep typing into chat if you like, but if anybody would like to ask a question. Okay, Well, I'm aware of your time, and I'm aware that I did say that the program would end at 3 o'clock. So I think I can in good conscience hold you over 5 minutes if it's for meditation. If it's for me blabbering on, no. But if it's for meditation, I can hold you after class. Okay, is that all right? Now, if you do have a hard stop here at 3 o'clock, we love you and we understand that you can't stay. It's just going to be 5 minutes. And because I promised myself I would have you guys do several sessions of these 5-minute sessions of meditation so that you could feel good about deepening your practice by doing some of the meditation. So thanks for that. Okay. Oh, thank you. Some folks are saying thank you. You're very sweet. Okay. Allowing ourselves to sit in the posture of meditation, feeling the feeling of the posture, forming the mental intention to meditate for the benefit of beings, taking one deep breath, letting go of the breath, and then allowing the breath to come naturally and go naturally, letting our mind come to rest. We'll meditate for about 5 minutes. Okay. Arising from meditation and thinking that we'll take these moments of mindfulness on the road with us as we go back into our everyday life from this little retreat. We make the inner aspiration that that what we've learned today, that we will use to benefit sentient beings, and so I just want to thank all of you for being here today and taking this time for yourself. And I recommend that from time to time that you do this. You just let your loved ones know, I'm going to take a couple hours on Saturday or whatever, or whenever you'd like to do it, and say, I'm just going to sit, I'm going to read, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to read and meditate, and maybe do some mantra practice and go out for a walk and be in nature, and just take a little time for yourself and begin to work with your mind and coming home to the mind. So thank you. I'm seeing some thank yous. It's like, thanks to all of you. It's been fantastic to be here with all of you. It's lots of folks I've known for quite a while, and I thank you all. And also want to let you know that the video from this program will be made available hopefully this evening, if I can get it together on YouTube. And I have a YouTube channel, Lama Kathy, on YouTube. And but I will also try to send a message out, an email message to everyone who registered for this program, and I'll include a link to Dropbox where you can see all of the slides from our whiteboard today, and then also the book recommendation. So Tanya, you and me probably got to put our heads together. Actually, I think I can do it pretty easily by gathering the notes and then pasting them into a document and then sharing the document. So I think I've got it. Yeah. Thank you, by the way. Shout out to our host with the most, Tanya. Hello, Tanya, from beautiful Lawrence, Kansas. Thank you so much for being part of our project today. Well, let's end with a dedication of merit. Oh, and by the way, I just now saw Kashmira. Yes, sorry, I didn't answer your question about Sangha and the absence of Sangha. I think we're doing it today. I think part of what we're doing today is Sangha when you don't have Sangha around. But she says, no worries. Well, thank you, dear. You can write me an email and we'll have a conversation about that. Yeah, I do appreciate it. Oh, darn, I missed one. Well, that's all right. That's why they invented the future, so you can put things into it. We'll gather together all the merit we accumulated here today and dedicate it to the liberation of all suffering beings. And that includes all of us. So through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Thank you. You guys are the best. I'll do a retreat with you guys anytime.
Thank you, Lama Kathy.
Thank you.
Lama Kathy. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Lama Kathy.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
Thank
you.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
thank you.
Thank you,
Have
everyone.
a good evening. Yeah, take good care.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank
Okay.
you.
Welcoming.
Bye-bye.